most powerful conversations I get to have about AI rarely start with data or algorithms or even ChatGPT. They're conversations that often start with people and communities, that start with inspiration, that start with the idea that human innovation might help us solve our greatest problems. For today, it's a conversation that starts with tipsy elephants. Stay with me. I was very lucky when I was young. I had a grandfather who was larger than life. He was a Hemingway-esque character, and he was a forester in the jungles of India. And when I was very young, 6 or 7, he would take me on walks. And I think back now, it must have been a comical figure we cut. He was 6 feet tall with a big mustache, a khaki safari suit, and probably me running along with shorts and a tank top, following him along, almost like a baby elephant following a bull. We'd walk through the jungle and he'd show me how to watch out for tigers and lions and track their spoor. He'd scare me with cobra sightings, just for fun. But eventually, along the way, he'd take me to where we were going, and we'd walk through the jungle and into a clearing, and there I'd see a sight that I've never forgotten. Elephants, dozens of them, babies and mamas and bull elephants, all clustered around a little treat of the forest, fallen fruit that had fermented in the sun, bananas and pineapples and melons, maybe an elephant equivalent of a tequila shot. And they'd be there and they'd be so joyous. They'd be trumpeting and they'd be running around. And to this day, I hold those moments of majesty when I think about connecting to the planet we lived in. Well, this story, unfortunately, takes a bit of a dark turn, but stay with me. As we know, what happened 30, 40 years ago in the forests of India are a little bit different today. People have had to extend their farms, they've had to build rice fields and encroach on these habitats. And the elephants, even though they're still looking for those tasty little treats, have fewer places to go. And unfortunately, what happens is maybe after a few too many alcoholic bananas, they start looking for rice, they look for sugarcane, they look for the products of human agriculture, and they start coming into farms. They start encroaching on these territories, and sometimes they'll destroy hundreds of acres in a night. Now remember, these are the farms of subsistence farmers who rely on this to fund their entire lives over the course of a year. Now humans are resilient. We know what to do, right? And so we've come up with some ways to address this. I visited some villages in India recently where they showed me how they would send their kids out, young boys and girls, and they spent all night sitting at the borders of these farms, just waiting and watching and listening. And if a group of elephants came, they were equipped with an armory of small little firecrackers that they were supposed to light and scream and wave. Now, often these kids in the morning couldn't wake up to go to school. They weren't going to school on a regular basis. And we know this wasn't a sustainable outcome. But in these same villages, a group of students came together and said, we can do something about this. We know that we have a technological solution, we just need to build it. And so what they did was using low-cost cameras and using pretty much the most modern and current models of machine vision we have possible, and little Raspberry Pis. They built little devices that were so cheap that they could deploy them across the jungle. And in real time, they could watch for elephants, and they could identify them. And they tied them into a system of lights that used predictive analytics and machine learning about these elephants' behaviors to flash in all kinds of different ways. So the elephants, who are quite smart and realize that a static light isn't something to be scared of, we're now saying, wait a minute, this is a place I shouldn't go. I should get into the corridors where I'm supposed to be, and over time, save lives. It's a story that I find so powerful that bridges the digital world with the real, that talks about AI that's developed not just with code, but with conscience, built for a purpose that solves a real problem, that protects people and lives and protects our relationship with nature. I have the great privilege of being in a role that lets me work with hundreds of groups like this group of students that are building AI solutions around the world that solve real problems. Things like, how do we make sure that we know when a hurricane is coming that's going to displace millions of people and make sure that we best put assets in place to help them? How do we make sure that we use low-cost IoT sensors with an AI model behind them that tracks seismic activity and rainfall and ensures that when a mudslide's about to happen that might affect a village of 50 or 100, we have 10 minutes of warning? I could tell you 100 stories like this, but what I'm inspired by is that we're in a moment in time where these great innovations that are happening around AI here in Silicon Valley and cities around the world are finding a way to reshape the way that people engage with the world around them at the front lines of vulnerability. But here's what I've also learned. Just because we can doesn't mean we will. That the idea of a future that's possible doesn't necessarily guarantee it for us. That there's a moment in time where we need to make a decision. When I was a kid, I used to also love these choose your own adventure books. Does anybody remember these? These kind of ratty little paperbacks, right? And the first time I'd read them, I'd kind of go through and you'd read a page, and at the bottom it would ask you a question. It would say, what kind of choice do you want the character to make? And based on that, you'd go to a different page. Well, the first time I read them, I'd follow it through and I'd kind of make the choices. And then eventually I got frustrated. I said, you know what? I'm just going to read it from front to back and figure out what all the options were. I feel like we're stuck in that a little bit. Then when we think about where technology development happens, about who owns it, about who it's for, we're stuck in a model that we know. Small groups of really bright people come together, often with inspiration and with real knowledge, and they come up with a product, an idea. Some support comes to them in the form of venture capital or other kinds of capital providers, and they grow it. And then at some point, big companies get involved, and all of the forcing functions happen, and somewhere along the way, purpose gets turned to profit. The idea is that these products could help the world become more about getting consumers and product market fit. I think we're stuck in an inevitability, an idea that the sources of AI in the world must happen in these companies, and they must be products that we consume, that we're customers of, that we're clients of. I wonder what it would look like to flip the page to a different place. One where we have a new kind of code for how we develop AI. One where we take shared ownership, where there's a mechanism and an environment, an ecosystem that says technology could live not far away from, but with the people who need it most. I've committed my life to figuring out how to do this, and a few thoughts that I'd share with you about what a code like this might include. The first is the idea that we need more people working on this, not just in companies and not just in academia, but out in the world, an entire civilization that's grounded in broad-based digital literacy. One where it doesn't matter if you're in India or in Africa or in North America, you have access to the ideas that AI can create and inspire, in data, in compute, in skills. And so we work with organizations like Technovation that are committed to taking 25 million women and girls and giving them broad-based digital access over the next 10 years. What kind of world would we have if a conversation about data protection, about algorithmic justice, about bias, was informed by 8 billion people with their lived experiences, their communities, the ways that they think about what matters to them as they think about economic opportunity? We need global governance of AI. Now, that's a dangerous word. Often when we talk about this, we think about regulation. We think about governments that'll tell us what to do and what not to do. But I think about something very different. I think about global governance as a way that we have a public conversation about what we value. It's not a conversation about what'll go into an algorithm or a model, but rather a conversation about where we want to invest, about what kinds of products we should create. We're seeing this happen in the world today. You'll note this as a common theme as I talk about this, that none of this is an aspirational idea in the sky. We have institutions stepping forward. They may not get headlines, but they're out there doing the work. Between organizations like UNESCO, where we're partnering to build readiness assessment for countries in the global majority, not the common ones that, again, you hear about when you think about the newest round of an AI system, but places where, like Senegal, AI could transform the agricultural sector. A place like Chile, where investments in automating mining could actually remove some of the dirtiest and terrible jobs that people have to do, often at the lowest wages. And I think about the direction we might give to those who architect our technological future, to ask them to innovate with empathy. I know a revolutionary concept, but to suggest that just because we can doesn't mean we should. And instead, what would it look like to build solutions to problems? To think about the next round of algorithmic development because we know that there's a use case for it that could fundamentally change the lived experience of a people. To think about the fact that we live in a society where we acknowledge that people are proximate to their problems is a fancy way to saying it. To know that people every day face the stresses and the realities of a life that's often under attack because of climate change, because of the power structures they live in, because of the everyday struggle they have to find economic opportunity. We know that people are proximate to their problems, and for some reason we're okay with it. But we also know that we don't do very much to help them be proximate to their solutions. That the ways that we address these problems often live in places very far away, where they have to struggle to get access. So what would it look like for us to invest in public investment in building compute capacity that the smallest states can get access to partner with the largest chip makers to say, there's an equity and a justice argument that's more than just profit in where and how we sell and build this capacity. And maybe the last part of a code like this, to make sure that we remember the fierce moral urgency of the moment. That we live in a world where through generations of the internet and social media and so many other technological things that have shown us what we're capable of, we've also built a system where billions of people have been left out. Around the decisions we make about AI, we have a moment in time now to change the way we build, we develop, we use, we evaluate, we create a future together. And we could step into that with great agency. I had a chance recently to spend some time with a very dear friend of mine. His name is Michael Runningwolf, and he's one of the most successful Indigenous American AI scientists. We worked together, Michael and I, to put together a program to bring some young people together to help them learn about AI. These were 13 to 15-year-old kids that had grown up in South Dakota and Montana, often on reservations or in small towns. None of them had ever coded before. And they came to us with such curiosity. They wanted to learn about AI. The first day, we taught them nothing about code. We taught them nothing about apps. We taught them nothing about models. Instead, we asked a friend, an amazing scholar, an ethnobotanist, to join us on a walk. Much like my grandfather and I when we were young, we walked through the canyons of the traditional Lakota people. And we looked and we learned about the plants, the animals, the environment around us. She taught us the difference between cow parsnip and hemlock, two plants that look exactly the same, one that tastes great and the other that'll kill you. She taught us about what these plants meant in traditional Lakota traditions. And then we took these kids back to the lab. And we taught them about AI. We taught them about visual models. We taught them about building an app. We taught them how to train a system. And they sat and using the data they had collected, they trained an app that did the following. You could take it with you on a walk through those same canyons, but across all kinds of lands. And you could take a picture of a plant. And it would use this model that these kids had developed in just a few weeks to tell you what it was. It was amazing to see how empowered these kids were to be creators of an AI system. That's not where it stopped. Then it took that plant and it told the user the name of that plant in Lakota, in a traditional language that their parents or their grandparents might have spoken. But many of these kids shared with me they'd never actually heard what these plants were called. They saw them all the time, but they didn't know. And then they said, well, what if we could connect this to a database of stories and mythologies? That as my grandfather did for me when we walked through the forest, as our ethnobotanist did for us when we walked through the canyons, walking with an app that could connect a moment in time of physical reality with a story of their people, the ancestral wisdom, the connection to a place and planet. And in that moment, I saw what it looks like when we take the code we've talked about and we ask people to step into a place of ownership. These kids were so inspired, so excited. And they said, you know what? I came here to learn about technology. But instead, I learned about my people. I learned about our place in the world. And I learned that I could build a connection to it. The story of AI ahead of us is yet to be written. We don't know who the heroes will be. We don't even know who the main characters are. We know there's a chance for purpose to triumph over profit. We know there's a space for amazing, inspiring things that will be done with these tools that'll change every single one of our lives. But the plot lines, the choices we make, the context of the story is ours to write. I think in this moment, we have a chance to ask the question, what story do we want to tell about AI and humanity? Thank you.